I guess one thing that I think we could dig into a bit more is like particularly those initial experiences where we're moving between different age groups. Was there anything that particularly surprised you about moving from teaching young learners into teaching older learners, such as, older teens and adults, that particularly surprised you?
I think that the first thing that comes to mind is that I expected children to like games and general gamification of learning in the classroom. I did not expect adults to like the same. I thought it would be patronizing or I would sound a bit artificial if I asked them to participate in a game, for instance. So even things like, I don't know if you played this game, but it was quite common around Southeast Asia where I taught for a few years, and it's called Slap the Board. Have you ever played that game?
I may have played an adaptation of it with a sticky ball, maybe.
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So just briefly, that you can put up words or pictures or any kind of visual representation of language, and have learners split into two teams, and you feed them some sort of language, and they have to choose the right side, for instance. And it can be with a slapper, it can be with a sticky ball. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, actually. And I think just the way you set it up with adults is just the one thing that I adapted, of course, was be like, this is a bit of fun. Let's have some fun with this game.
Yeah.
And I was always surprised by how much they actually enjoyed that type of thing. For me, it was bingo. We can adapt bingo, not just for numbers, but for items of vocabulary or questions that you need to ask in order to get so many in a row. I mean, I played that many games of bingo across all my age groups. They all love bingo.
Yeah.
At least that's been my experience. So aside from attitudes to games, gamification, was there anything else that surprised you about moving between different age groups and what may be the same or different about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So attitudes to games is one, but also attitudes to the whole learning journey and just making mistakes along it. I think that's one thing that really surprised me. I didn't expect adults to be that sort of unfamiliar or scared of making mistakes in the language classroom as much as I've seen them be. But sometimes it's due to cultural factors. Sometimes it's a background. Sometimes it's just having a bad day. And you know what? I just don't want to make a mistake right now because I don't feel like feeling inadequate in any way.
Absolutely. I've worked a lot with adults who are very, very shy to speak, very anxious about making mistakes or losing face because they're making an error or making a mistake. And I had to factor that into my lesson planning and thinking about the type of tasks I do, type of grouping I did, and how I could create lots of opportunities to build their confidence by, listening to them while they were working on tasks in groups and then praising them on what they were doing well on in the open class setting to build their confidence over time. But it definitely had to take like a long term approach to kind of create that space where they felt more comfortable making mistakes and saw that as part of a learning progression rather than something that they felt originally embarrassed about.
So yeah, absolutely. And I think modeling behavior is really important. So for whatever we're talking about in the ESL classroom, we've been making mistakes. If as a teacher, I model this behavior and I say, oops, you know what? I made a mistake here. I'm really sorry. Let me correct that. I think it's going to make my learners feel more comfortable making mistakes and saying, oops, it's okay. Let's see how we can fix it.
So we talked about gamification, errors. I think there was one other thing that comes to mind when thinking about the different age groups that really stands out for me, and that's the learner's motivation and the external factors that influence why they're in the classroom. Of course, when you're working with young learners, you've got the state school curriculum and parents, but adults is slightly different. It could be for an array of reasons, but for some of the adults I've taught on longer courses, it's been as part of employer requirements, and they're expected to hit certain deadlines by certain dates as part of their agreement with their employer to improve in that particular skill. And I found that's been quite an interesting pressure to acknowledge and to give feedback on and encouragement on to help them hit those important goals and to really focus the lesson content and their progress on the goals that they have in mind. That may be different to your experience. I think that's very specific to the courses I've taught and the learners I've had and the purposes of those courses. What about your experience with adults? Has external factors and motivations been an issue at all?
Absolutely, it has. My experience has mostly been around Southeast Asia with adults, and I have found, especially in Vietnam, where I was teaching, I was able to connect a lot with my students, and they would always tell me about their everyday problems, and things that were on their mind. And so I always knew when someone was having a bad day, and I could clearly see how that affected their progress in the lesson. And I think allowing that kind of space for them to have that moment of, you know what, I'm not feeling like it today is okay. It's okay to have an off day, but at the same time, it's important that as teachers, we're right next to them. We're supporting them if they need help for however much they can give on the day. I think that's really important.